Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending upon where you live, and welcome to today's AXUG webinar. It's the start of a quarterly series we're hosting on keeping up with the continuous release cycle. And this webinar is devoted to the changes in Q1 of 2020. Our presenter today and for this every quarter will be Nathan Klaus from Dynamic Consulting. I want to welcome Nathan and thank him for sharing his expertise with you all today. Before I turn the presentation over to Nathan, I want to talk just a little bit about what's coming up in the user group. We are always looking for volunteers, whether your passion is to present in a webinar format like this, to instruct in a more academic format via the AXUG Academy, or to server write content as part of a special interest group or on the open forum, please go to the user group homepage and sign up to volunteer your time. If you do, I get an email and I will be sure to get in touch with each and every one of you. And next you can see our event calendar. Our community summit in Europe has been changed to the end of June. We're still hoping we can hold that. And our next US event is Focus in May. We're still hoping we can hold that as well. However, we are monitoring the nationwide health situation and making updates and changes as they are necessary. So stay tuned to the entire event calendar, as we'd love to have you join us if we can, and if we can't, the events will maybe move to virtual. And lastly, you're all on mute for best sound quality. If you have a question during Nathan's presentation, just type it in the question box. We'll save up those questions and we'll have a Q&A at the end. And because you registered for the event, you'll receive an email in the next day or so that contains a link to both Nathan's PowerPoint and a recording of the webinar. So with that, I'm going to change presenter rights to Nathan. Nathan, I'll let you know when I can see your screen. I can see it, and I'll start the recording now, and you can begin.
All right, thank you. Hello, my name is Nathan Klaus. I'm a technical solution architect with Dynamic Consulting. As Julie mentioned, we'll be going over the new stuff that's come out in Q1 related to finance and operations, now called finance and supply chain. There's my contact info if you'd like to reach out to me. I also have a blog where I talk about various technical and functional things. You can also find me on Twitter at NathanKlausAX. Today's agenda, we're going to go over what's new in 10.0.8 and .9 as well. And I've grouped everything into sort of 3 areas. We're going to talk about, just go over globalization features, go over some of the simple features that require very little explanation, and then do a deeper dive into some of the more complex features. So first, and what's new in .8. We have some new stuff related to globalization. If you operate in any of these countries, I would suggest you go look at the Microsoft docs to get a better idea of what's going on. We just simply don't have time to go over everything related to globalization in this webinar. Next, we're going to go over just simple features that were released in 0.8. First one is the allow empty batch attribute values. So all this feature does is make it so that you can have empty batch attribute values on the batch attribute screen. So again, very simple. And similarly with the make mobile device inventory movement status field editable, when using RF or mobile device and using that transaction type, that field now becomes editable once you turn this feature on. Now for some of the more complex features. There's a feature that would enable update to bank transaction types. So when you turn this on, when you're looking at your bank transaction screen, you get a new button called Update Bank Transaction Types. which will bring up a dialog which will let you in bulk reassign bank transaction types for records that meet a certain criteria. So you can do this for anything that is, I believe, currently not posted. Next is the navigation to BOM versions from BOM lines. So if you turn this feature on when you're looking at your bill of material lines and you select a line that is a BOM, you're able to get to the BOM versions for that BOM from the BOM line screen, so you can see what versions are currently active and what's upcoming. So no new functionality, just easier way to get around. Next is some XML punch-out additional functionality related to purchasing. So that's sort of the blurb from Microsoft, but there's some new functionality related to administration for troubleshooting purposes, and new functionality that allows a purchase order to be sent back to a supplier after being confirmed. And as a call out, this one is in private preview only, so you can probably play around with it in a developer environment, but you'll have to contact Microsoft if you have further interest in checking this out in something that is not a tier 1 environment. Next, this is sort of a simple one, but I just want to call out that this is in public preview. There's a new Office-like UI experience for business document management. If you want to turn that on, I wasn't able to capture screenshots of that, but you're free to check it out. If you're happy with business document management right now, you can probably skip over this one. Next is using the inventory unit of measure and quantity and inventory journals. So what this does is adds 2 new fields to your inventory journals. So this on screen is what a typical inventory journal looks like. With this feature on, you can see we've added 2 new fields of unit quantity and unit. So that allows you to punch in something that maybe isn't the inventory unit of measure. So if you, let's say, sell in eaches and inventory in cases, you could say, I've got 12 eaches, and that converts to a case. So then you don't necessarily have to know your inventory unit or know the conversion to inventory journals. Next, this is another simple one. There's a feature to enable automatic generation of license plate numbers when doing a report is finished using the job card device. So if you're using manufacturing execution, you turn this feature on, you get a new parameter here on the job card for devices setup screen. You set that to yes, and whenever you do a report is finished, it'll automatically generate an LP for you. Next is on the posted transactions by journal report. This feature allows you to specify dates on the report. And just as a call out, when you turn this feature on, you then have to specify dates for that report. You can no longer run it wide open. You have to specify a to and a from date, like 1/1/2020 to 12/31/2020, but you can't run it from beginning of time to 12/31/2020. And this is what that enhanced report looks like with this feature on. Next, we have enable partial receipt for subcontracted items to fix an issue with calculation of scrap for BOM lines and type vendor. So that is the actual feature name. So the feature names can be quite long, but this basically does 2 things. It enables a partial receipt for subcontracted items, which is a new feature, and then it also fixes an issue where the incorrect updated scrap quantity when you're using BOM lines of type vendor. So it's part feature, part bug fix. So if you use subcontracted items or vendors, be sure to check this one out. Next is the cash position inquiry. So this is related to public sector, but this lets you determine corresponding cash positions for financial dimension sets that contain self-balancing dimensions. So this is similar to a trial balance, but just sort of does the math and shows the work a lot more, specifically for a public sector entity. Next is the set job description on the position forecast position to be read-only. So you enable this feature, you get a new parameter and human resources shared parameters. If you set that to yes, when you're looking at your positions or active positions or forecast positions, the description on the position is now read-only. So what this means is when you create a new position, your description for that position becomes locked once you hit save. You can always turn this off if you decide that you don't need this. But again, this is a public sector change. Next, we have another public sector change. We have the forecast position detail report. So there's a list page for forecast positions. This just translates that into a report form. Next, we have the purchase agreement matching policy. So this allows you to set line matching policies on a purchase agreement that will copy onto the purchase agreement headers, all purchase agreements, and the purchase order lines that come from those purchase agreements. So if you want to have different matching policies for different purchase agreements, you can now do that. And also this is data entity aware, so if you use data entities to load some of this data in, all that functionality is there as well. Next we have the subledger transfer from General Journal performance optimization. So this reintroduces some functionality that we had in 2012. It enables an asynchronous batch to transfer from SPL to GL. This uses the reliable asynchronous transfer that was introduced with as part of 10.0.6. Next, we have auto match and create expense from receipts. So this is similar functionality to a company that I won't use their name. They do stuff with expenses and they have a mobile app for it. But this allows for you to upload receipts and to have them run them through an optical character recognition service. This will allow you to add a receipt. It'll get scanned, match, it'll create an attachment, and fill in all of the details in expense management. And there's a new parameter in expense management to sort of make all of this magic happen. So here it is, along with a button to help you set that up. This does require some additional Azure knowledge and resources, but if you use expense management, it's certainly worth checking out. Next, we have some vendor invoice workflow enhancements. There's actually only one enhancement. This prohibits the submission of a workflow where an invoice number would potentially be a duplicate if your system isn't set up to allow duplicates. So historically, this would throw an error when posting the invoice after it's already gone through workflow. Now we're just moving that error forward in the process. Next is the feature called parent license plates cannot be target license plates. The name on this is a little confusing, but what this does is if enabled, parent license plates can be picked in full. So if you have a license plate that has a bunch of mixed items or is not a full pallet or something along those lines, you can now pick the parent license plate, but this is only available for raw material picking, sales orders, inventory movements, and transfer issues. And as a call out, this is in public preview, so there may be some bugs in there, or the functionality may change a little bit before it's fully released. Next, we have the deferred put for containers. With this feature on, if there is a put before the current line of the container, this will close the work for that container, create a batch job to put that container to a location asynchronously, and then mark the work as complete for that put. And again, this is currently in public preview, so there may be some bugs, or the functionality may change a little bit before it's fully released. So next we're going to cover what's new in 10.0.9. There's a whole lot more in .9 than there was in .8. If there's any questions, feel free to type them in chat, or ask Julie or I to, cover it in greater detail. But we'll just go ahead and jump right into globalizations. So again, we don't have time to go over all of these, but if you operate in any of these countries, Switzerland, China, Mexico, Poland, India, or Brazil, I would encourage you to check out the release notes and see if these features will do anything for you. With our simple features, we have one that will improve the performance when copying charges from vendor invoice lines. So there's nothing really to show. When you turn this feature on, it uses a different algorithm to copy charges from a vendor invoice that Microsoft says is more performance oriented. So it's worth checking out if you're seeing issues there. Next is the preview of full page apps. What this does is allows you to embed Power Apps or third-party apps as full page apps, similar to what you can do with a dashboard right inside F&O. So if you've developed a Power App that you want to embed as a full page app, this feature would let you do that. Next is the ability to update bank balances when posting an advanced ledger entry. So when posting an advanced ledger entry, if the account you're posting to is also a bank account, you'll get a checkbox that say, update bank account balances when this posts. Next is associate purchase order inventory transactions with a load. So this will record inbound load IDs for purchase order inventory transactions as workers register inbound quantities using the mobile device. Next is the associate purchase, attachments button on the pending invoices journal form. So this will just enable the header attachments button for pending invoices, so you can post attachments to a pending invoice. Next is budget planning query optimization. Again, so this is just a performance enhancement. If you turn this on, there's some different, some different logic on the back end that happens that is more performant for sort of everyday use. Next is you can convert electronic reporting outbound documents to Microsoft or from Office formats to PDF. So if you have an Excel or Word document that you're generating, you can now generate it as a PDF if you're using electronic reporting. The next two, copy tax registration as default and defaulting of customer business address. These features will just sort of change the way in which some information gets copied onto either a vendor or a customer. So with a copy tax registration number, this controls the behavior of copying tax registration number. So if it's turned on, so this is just a sort of weird call out. If it's turned on, the tax registration number will not be copied as the default tax exempt number, but if it's turned off, you'll get your standard functionality, which is to copy the tax registration number to the default tax exempt number. Related to defaulting of customer business address, this, again, it does exactly what the name describes. Next, we have the deferred put processing. So this is actually an enhancement to the deferred put that we mentioned in 10.0.8. This enables the audit template feature with a trigger event set to prior. This also includes some additional logging, so you can see what happened and how the deferred put decided to trigger and execute. Next, we have document routing agent for electronic reporting. So this now lets you use any of the print destinations available in the document routing agent for electronic reporting. So if you have a PDF printer or a file printer, really anything you can print to, that now becomes available for electronic reporting. Next is the ECB import. So ECB stands for European Central Bank. And this allows you to import exchange rates either on the current date or the previous date. Next, we have enable batch processing for payment advice reports. So this just lets you run these reports in batch. There are 2 new versions of these reports that need to be enabled and configured in print management, but then from there you can just run all these reports in batch if you're using them. Next is retail specific. If you're using retail, you can enable specific channel return policies by channel. Next is enable defaulting of fiscal data from an invoice account. That feature lets you allows you to configure rules for defaulting fiscal data like tax numbers and sales tax groups on sales orders, free texts, and purchase orders based on information available on either the customer or vendor. Next, we have enable rounding rules. So when this is enabled, the withholding tax amount will be rounded based on the setup you provide here. So, and that could be normal, downward, rounding up, or provided transaction currency, provided that the transaction currency and the tax currency are the same. And that little detail will become important in a little bit. Next, we enable the usage of the EP Plus library and electronic reporting. So this is just switching to a different utility on the back end that will slice and dice and sort through data and represent it in a certain way. So overall functionality is going to remain the same, but we might see some performance improvements, or we just are using a different library in the back end that may be more suited to the task at hand. Next, we have evaluate work header breaks before header maximums during work creation. So what this will do is the work header breaks will be evaluated before the work header maximums. So it'll generate your work slightly differently. Next, we have the feature to filter active positions. So on some screens where you might have a drop down related to positions, there will now be a secondary one to filter that to just active positions. Next, we have inventory journal approval workflow. So that adds a workflow for inventory journals. It's only available for movement, inventory adjustments, transfers, BOMs, ownership, counting, and tag counting journals. In terms of overall workflow functionality, it is what you would expect. So if you're interested in that, I'd suggest you turn that on and check it out. The next feature is to let invoices be submitted to the workflow with incomplete or incorrect accounting distributions. That is exactly as it sounds. So the workflow can be kicked off, and we can adjust a few things after the fact if need be. Next is the purchase order quantity left to load calculation using registered quantities. So what this will do is, when this is enabled, the calculation of quantity left over to load for a purchase order is replaced with a view that shows the registered quantities marked with a load. Next, we have an additional list view of expense reports created by delegating workers. Again, just another list page to look at expenses. The next feature is to prohibit submission to workflow when the invoice total and registered invoice total are not equal. Next, we have a new expression builder related to expense that addresses some of the issues with intercompany expense scenarios that use projects. So if you've experienced issues there, I would recommend checking that out. And then we have the ability to calculate a purchase order delivery date based on a calendar, and this is specific to public sector. So the last few simple ones, we have recommended fields. This adds a framework that allows users to recommend fields be added to specific list pages or drop downs based on how your users use the system. It ships with only 5 rules from Microsoft, but you can define your own. And when a user looks at a report, it may say, hey, most users add this here. Would you like to go ahead and do that? So sort of a neat feature, but not much functionality there right now. Next is for retail statements. You can enable trickle feed. So with this feature off, this is an end of day activity where all of your transactions are collected into a single statement, and then those may be posted in batch. With trickle feed, data trickles in throughout the day as sales occur, and those batch jobs at the store level, at the channel level, execute and push data back to back office. Next is the Statement of Treasurer's Accountability Report. So it's similar to a trial balance, but it presents information that's used on a daily basis for public sector treasurers. So again, it's public sector, and it's focused for issues they have there. And then lastly, sales tax conversion. So this enables dual currency support for the tax domain. After this, once you enable this, user could specify the routing of sales tax amounts conversions under different currencies. So next we're going to hop into some of the more advanced features that have been released. As the name implies, this one is in preview. This allows you to group columns using the new grid control. It does require the new grid control, which was released in 10.0.6. Unfortunately, that grid control has lots of known issues. I want to say somewhere on the order of 100. I don't know the exact number, but Microsoft's working on it, so that's why this is sort of a cool feature for the time being, but I don't think it's ready for prime time just yet, and it is in public preview. But what that looks like is here I'm on my vendor transaction screen. I would right-click on something I want to sort by. In this case, I'm using date. I select group by this column, and then now my grid is grouped by date. It also adds a default sort on date as well when I do that. Another cool feature related to this is I can now add a footer to my grid that will sum up the values in my grid. So sort of similar to some functionality we have in Excel, but really cool, and I really like this. So with this, you could potentially create a view for a form and turn it into something that's sort of like a report that you could share with other people to give them an Excel-like view of what's going on for a particular entity or business process or whatever the case may be. So next we have this feature that will add the vendor and customer ID and vendor and customer name to the voucher transaction list page. So this is the standard voucher transaction screen, but with this feature on, if we scroll all the way to the right, you can see our vendor account and name and our customer account and name if there's information related to that transaction. So sort of cool to see. And then with this, you could export to Excel and slice and dice however you want. Next, we have allowing filtering on the tax 1099 detail report by year. So with this feature on, the report itself functions exactly the same, but you just get a new dialog option to punch in the reporting year, and it'll filter everything to just that year. Next is catch weight processing with warehouse management. So this is a fairly significant release. This could be an hour-long call just by itself because of how much functionality is in here. But it introduces some major improvements to catch weight, and also integrates most catch weight processes within warehouse management. So historically, this has just been WMS 1 and 2. This now covers WHS. So that there's tons to talk about here, and unfortunately, we just don't have time to talk about it. But if you are a manufacturer that uses catch weight and you want to use warehouse management, definitely check this out. As a call out, this is in public preview, so I expect to see there might be some bugs in there, and the functionality may change a little bit before it's fully released. Next, we have check unit precision for not stocked items. With this, when we turn this feature on, we get a new parameter in accounts receivable that says, check quantity for decimal precision. And what this does is when we post an invoice or really any transaction, the system will check to make sure that the value specified, rounded to 2 decimals, still equals the value that was input. And if that is not the case, you will get either a warning or an error that things don't match. So this will help prevent, weird rounding issues on the back end if users are specifying stuff that is more than 2 decimals. Next is cluster putaway. So this is something I think people have been waiting for a while. Cluster putaway just allows you to put away multiple license plates at the same time, and this can be really helpful for the retail industry. And it removes the limitations of the locate by functionality, and includes ASN and mixed LPs. Again, this one is in public preview, so the functionality may change before it's fully released. Next, we have compare item price storage. So this provides a new way of executing the compare item price report for if you have a large quantity of item numbers. So with this, you can filter the results and drill through and see details by cost group type or cost group, and export the results to external system. You can also do multiple comparisons at a time, and this all runs in the background, and then you can pull those up and export them out and do whatever you'd like with them. Next, we have Consolidate shipment. So this feature allows for automated consolidation of shipments at the time of batch releasing for sales or transfer orders. Shipment consolidation policies can be set up to manage this, and the policies have queries that define the applicability and a modifiable set of fields, driving the decision making of grouping load lines at the shipment level. This one is available is part of a public preview. The next major release in 10.0.9 is one called Credit Management. This allows you to create and manage credit limits, block customer orders based on rules, and also release those orders. So this is a screenshot of what credit and collections looks like before this functionality was added. So this is a screenshot from 10.0.8. And this is what was added in 10.0.9. So you can see there's quite a bit of stuff there, and we unfortunately don't have time to do a deep dive on all the functionality. But in general, the added functionalities are management of risk scores, system suggested credit limits, configurable blocking rules, dynamic release from credit holds, credit limit management, and also you can keep track of historical credit limits. So as credit limits change, you can see when they were changed and by how much. Next is the flexible warehouse level dimension reservation. So this allows you to specify batch as a flexible dimension. So what that means is you can, with this turned on and then configured, you can reserve a specific batch to a customer order or allow reservation of a specific batch on a sales order. So if you are using the batch functionality, you can just specify that, for this sales order, I don't care specifically which unit gets shipped, but it does have to be from a unit from this particular batch. There's also additional verbiage from Microsoft and the link, so you can get a better idea of what it does. But it does come with some drawbacks currently. So it doesn't support any of the following features. So catch weight, physical negative inventory, reservation against pegs to supply, and transfer orders are raw material. And again, this one is in public preview. Next is IoT intelligence. So this is, I think, a really cool feature. It allows you to facilitate the tracking and optimization of overall of equipment effectiveness in real time. So it can either connect sensors or use sensors already on the machines, have that data go to Azure, define rules on when that stuff needs to go and show up in here in FNO for stuff you need to act upon. And some of the examples that Microsoft has provided is, the ability to see delayed orders, if equipment is down, if there are any quality anomalies. So if you have, let's say, a sensor that detects vibration, and if that's going off, that may cause some quality issues. Next, automated inventory updates. So if you have a sensor that is basically a report as finished sensor for bulk items, you could have that trigger automatic updates for your inventory. And in general, the platform has, they call it no-code capabilities. You do need some additional Azure resources and some know-how there. But, with the availability of sensors and Azure, you can get this up and running with no coding required. Next is item consolidation, location utilization. So this is a tool to give warehouse managers so they can easily view and filter volumetric utilization of location across the warehouse. So they can select locations and create inventory movement work straight from an order to consolidate items and better utilize the space. And how this works is when you execute this process, it stages work to consolidate locations, removes any work related to pending work that's already in process, finalizes the quantities for the work and location, and then creates movement work to move all of those items from wherever they currently are and put them to the item consolidation location. And this is currently in public preview. This is the screen that where you can find some of that. Unfortunately, there was no demo data to show, but there are two new screens related to item consolidation. Next is location license plate positioning. This is for really for warehouses where you have multi-pallet locations, such as 2 or 3 deep pallet racking, and you aren't sure exactly where the LP is. This will allow you to say, this is at this rack position 3, which might be, pallet 3 in the rack. This will allow add the sequence number to the license plate. For each license plate that is in the put location, the sequence number orders the license plate with the storage dimension location. And this one is also in public preview. Next we have location product dimension mixing. So this lets you decide whether any of your product dimensions can be mixed for a certain location profile, or if only one combination of these dimensions is allowed. So this is probably helpful for probably the fashion industry. So if you want to allow, let's say you want to have one pallet location profile allow only a particular size, but you don't care about, we can have mixed color in there. So let's say you've got red, blue, and green shirts that you want to allow in one location profile. This functionality would let you do that. Next is manual shipment consolidation. This lets you create consolidation policies, review change those policies with several other filters, review the results for that consolidation, and manually consolidate if able. So this would have the system consolidate for you, and if you don't like the consolidation it generates, you can manually consolidate if you're able. Since this is a time-driven requirement, some shipments would get consolidated when released to the warehouse. However, you couldn't consolidate some if, let's say, they're already at the dock. And lastly, this one is in public preview. This is one of the screens that we'd use to manually consolidate shipments. But again, there's unfortunately no demo data for me to show. Next, we have the organization-wide wave step code. This enables the wave step code for all legal entities, and this makes it so that the step codes are based on system-generated values rather than like a free text value that a user may have entered. And with this on, a user would have to select between a predefined wave code when using wave step codes to link to a specific wave method instance for their corresponding templates. So it, in short, just gets rid of any inconsistencies you may have seen with user-generated codes and sets everything to be organization-wide, and that would cover all legal entities inside an organization. Next, we have organization-wide system-directed work sequencing. With this feature on, it extends the current system-directed picking with new system-directed query orders, where the user can set up a sequence and query or use multiple queries which will evaluate all work created. So this just gives you more control over system-directed work sequences. This is an organization-wide change, so it would cover all legal entities. And this one is also in public preview. Next, we have outbound sorting. So there's really not much to show since a lot of this is setup and logic driven. But when you enable this feature, you'll see a new parameter in warehouse management parameters called sorting location type. And what this will do is allow you pallet building, opportunities with the ability to sort packed containers to a correct pallet after the packing station to build a packing hierarchy. And these pallets can later be moved to the correct staging location with a single work order capturing all of the packed containers. And the warehouse worker has the ability to choose which pallet the packed containers should be put to, and the maximum number of boxes a pallet can have, and how those pallets are needed for any given scenario. Similar to a lot of the other warehousing stuff, this one is also in public preview. Next, we have planned cross-docking. This introduces sort of advanced planned cross-docking where all the inbound inventory required to satisfy an existing order can be moved directly to its outbound location or staging area without being put away first. The remaining inventory from the inbound source is then directed to be put to the correct storage location using the regular put away process. This allows users to skip inbound put away or outbound picking of inventory that is already marked for inclusion on an outbound order. And again, this one is also in public preview. Next, we have some MRP related enhancements. So the name of the feature is called Planned Production Orders for Planning Optimization. So you might have seen some releases from Microsoft about their running MRP in a matter of minutes rather than hours. This is that specific feature, but before anyone gets too excited, this is currently for distributors only. So if you're a manufacturing organization, this unfortunately currently does not apply. But Microsoft has tons of documentation on this. I've included a link in the slide, which will be shared after this. But at a high level, when you kick off an MRP run, a bunch of data goes from your F&O database to the connector for supply chain management, which goes into the planning optimization engine hosted in Azure, which basically processes everything in memory, so it can happen on the order of thousands of times faster per operation rather than how it has historically. So really cool features, but it's unfortunately for distributors only. Once it's done crunching all those numbers, it sends the MRP run results back to F&O or supply chain, and then that is the result of your MRP run. Next, we have the improved user interface for the report progress dialog using the job card device and manufacturing execution. This is what that screen now looks like if you enable this feature. You can see it's sort of focused on an experience where the user may not necessarily have a keyboard. So you could throw this on a tablet with no mouse or keyboard and it would work just fine. If you go into any of these screens, there's a full keyboard or number pad as whatever makes sense, and it's streamlined for limited input or only a touchscreen. So next we have the print label from job card device. So sort of related to the last feature, with this feature enabled, you can print a label when doing a report is finished from the job card. This label is part of document routing and enabling the job card for devices page. So that's one of the setup screens for job card. Next, we have the product service type. This is an interesting one. So this adds subtypes for products of type service. And really what this does is it opens the door for service types. So you could have an item that is a service that has a service type of, let's say, warranty or repair or whatever the case is. Currently, the only item that's supported by Microsoft is warranties, and I've seen only limited functionality around this. I'm not sure if this was just a framework release, and Microsoft expects partners and end users to fill in the functionality. But right now, in terms of its status, this one is marked as release, which I'm going to interpret to mean feature complete. But it is sort of a cool feature. You can extend this to include warranty and repair and whatever other service types you may have in your organization. So next we have quality check. So this is specific to warehouse management. And this is basically an alternative to the existing quality check process that's more flexible and just faster. So at the time of receiving, a worker is required to perform whatever the desired quality check is, and must decide whether or not to accept or reject each license plate that they've scanned after they've been registered. So accepted license plates will be guided to the storage location like normal, but anything that is rejected will be diverted to a quality check location for further inspection. So the best way to think about this is, if you're receiving stuff in on the dock and something has clearly been physically damaged, you would have a quality check there for, is box damaged or something along those lines. And if it is, move it, put it away, or I'm sorry, not put it away and move it to a quality check location to see if it's just superficial damage or if it's something that needs to be returned. Next, we have replenishment over location of capacity. This allows for for more replenishment work to be created that will than a location will allow, but also block replenishment work from being completed once the location is full. As inventory is picked from that location and the amount of inventory in that location drops, the pre-existing replenishment work that was sort of allowing for replenishment over becomes available again. And this is used largely for either high volume or space constrained warehouses. So if you have let's say bulk items you want to continually replenish, let's say near the dock or something along those lines, you'd use this feature to make sure that those bins or whatever the case is remain full throughout the day. So as limited resources become freed up in terms of space, end users will see that new work and complete it and bring stuff to replenish to make sure that bin stays full. Next, we have RFQ questions and answers. So if you're using the RFQ process of, vendors may sometimes have some questions that pertain to your request. This feature will allow vendors to use vendor collaboration and ask questions about, the particular RFP. These questions and answers are available on the list page for requests for quotes. Users can publish answers to vendors' questions more than once, and vendors can't post questions after a vendor is selected and the RFQ is awarded or after a particular cutoff date. So when you turn this feature on, you'll get a new parameter here in procurement and sourcing parameters to allow vendor questions. And then from the request for quotations screen, you'll have a questions and answers section available for that RFQ. Next, we have the warehouse slotting feature. So slotting allows users to gather and consolidate demand by item or unit of measure from orders and either status order reserved or released. Once demand has been generated, it can be located to locations that will be used for picking based on quantity, unit, physical dimensions, fixed locations. But once the slot plan has been established, replenishment work can be created to bring the appropriate amount of inventory to each location. Like a lot of the other warehouse stuff, this one is also in public preview. Next, we have wave label printing. This allows for labels to be printed according to a number of cartons on a single work line. Historically, without using the containerization feature, this means that quantity of cartons. If there's a quantity of 100 cartons, this feature will print out 100 labels. Some of the features of the labels is they can include the enumerations of the labels. So, this is label 1 of 12. These can be used in relation to bill of ladings. They can generate a unique SSCC code or serial shipping container code. It can also allow for the creation of GS1 compliant numbers. They also support hazmat codes. You can reprint them. You can support also voiding of labels and reprinting them. And in general, as you generate labels over time, there is functionality to clean up labels, that were generated 30 days ago or 90 days ago. They are no longer of relevance to you or your organization. And our last feature is the wave load building feature. This allows users to create loads automatically based on some user-defined criteria. This will allow you to create load build templates. That's a screenshot of the load build template screen right there. And those link to specific wave template methods and controls what load, either an existing or a new one, load lines are being waived and will be added to. So users can also choose whether to evaluate volumetric constraints for the load template and or volumetric or weight maximums can also be considered along with some other criteria. And again, this is like all of the warehousing stuff. This one is in public preview as well. So that is everything. I threw a lot at you. That was a high-level review of all new features. So if you have any questions, type them in the chat now. We do have, I believe, 2 minutes left. If you'd like to hear more about a particular area, reach out to me, or if you'd like to see a webinar on this, reach out to Julie. And there's my email on screen, and also my Twitter handle if you'd like to contact me there. Thanks.
Absolutely, Nathan. Thank you so much. Great presentation. You covered a ton of things going on in all the different applications. We do not have any questions in the queue. So, we do. Here's one. So Tammy is asking, just your opinion. There are so many features. Is this an unusual amount for a release?
I think we're going to see sort of ebbs and flows. So we're seeing sort of 2 releases per quarter. So that's 2 releases for 3 months worth of work. So we're going to see probably 1 release that's small and 1 release that's big, and then sort of a month off. So I think this is going to be sort of typical with a small release, a big release, and then no release. So I think in terms of actual chronology, 10.0.8 came out at the beginning of the year. We had a month off, and then we had 10.0.9, which was released just this month, and that had a lot in it, and that was sort of playing catch up from the month off that we had.
Right, great. Thank you so much. That's the only question we had, Nathan. So I want to thank you so much and remind folks that we'll be posting both the recording of this webinar and the PowerPoint in our content library. And you will have access to that if you're a member. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the week. Goodbye.